It's really piracy that kind of saved the music industry in a way, because without piracy, there's no chance that Spotify would have got their pilot test licensing. To be in entertainment, there's only two ways you can be there. Either you have an asset that people want to have, or you write checks. If you just change the name to fans instead of consumers when you're thinking about that, you will think about your marketing strategy in a completely different way. So the artist that has been very successful in the new kind of world is the one that has been able to move from being the old superstar model into the friends model. It's not a human right to be successful or make money on music just because you're uploading music to Spotify. So what you need to think about is that you are basically responsible for building your first 1,000 fans. You need to understand that algorithms could be in your favor, but they are incentivized by things that you actually can control yourself. You're not cheaper than anyone, like, so why should they listen to you? You just have to come up with a why.
So you helped build the playlist empire at Spotify, which changed how the world listens to music. What's one of the biggest behind the scenes shifts that helped make that happen?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I think you need to go back a little bit, yeah, from Sweden originally, and when Sweden specifically, me coming from the music industry with a big interest of like tech and products, I think everyone that was in the music industry when the piracy specifically hit the Nordic countries so hard with Pirate Bay, I mean, it's totally crushed, I would say, like the music industry in the Nordic countries, specifically Sweden as well. I think everybody that was in the music industry was starting thinking about like what could be the future solution for this. And it's interesting because we're in the middle of 2000 here, like, and I started to come together with investors and people, engineering people, and did a couple of startups. And this is the same time, like when the Spotify's and the SoundCloud from Sweden started as well. So I think from the beginning, our first attempt was a little bit to figure out if there was a different model. I mean, you have to go back and think about, this is the MySpace era, when the MySpace was a thing and Facebook starting to like get into the market, but was not like the dominant thing. So the first thing we did was more like MySpace kind of community, but a MySpace killer, where we tried to look into like rev share models with the creators. So we built a platform called Snowfish. Like we started to get some attraction, but that area was very difficult because you were up against the Facebooks of the world, with completely different resources. But when I started to see what Spotify came out, I think especially in Sweden, everybody realized that that was very special, and unique. And you get these private beta invites, and you start to realize, oh, this is probably what's going to happen. And I think we were very pragmatic around, and from a macro perspective, and thinking about what that would mean, because the way Spotify was, if you remember in the beginning, it was really like all the words music, and it was a search bar, like, and you were fascinating that you can find all music and play it. So everybody was really into that explore and trying to find the songs that they didn't expect to be there. That was like really the early adopters. My take and the team that we work with there was a little bit like it's going to be a completely different system, because it goes from a transaction industry where money is actually limiting you to how much music you can listen to. So that was when I grew up, and probably you as well, like you had to pick, like, this is my genre, this is my identity, and that's where I kind of got my music from. Here was like, okay, what happens if everyone has all the music in the world available? uh, and the other thing is that what people forget about is that maybe only 25% of the music consumptions actually went into record stores. Most people got their music for radio, TV, whatever it is, like, and maybe walked into the stores at Christmas and bought like the yearly album kind of thing. That was the world, as you know. You probably had the people that had these shelves of records, and you had the people that just had these, 10, 15 CDs there. So it was an interesting approach, because then we realized that after all these kind of music buffs, early adopters comes into Spotify, if this model works out, so premium subscribers, all these people coming in that is used to get it served up, they're gonna look for an easy way to play music. So that was the hypothesis. But at the same time, we also realized that genres will not be mean the same thing. It's going to be more about the context, more about the moods, the moments. So And this is early days. Keep this is like 2009, 2010. So like playlist was not something that people knew about. You know playlist because someone might share a long kind of URL to you that you clicked on and it opened a Spotify playlist. But there was not like a it was not a primer. It was not like a trying to, with context to sell you an experience. So our strategy was like, okay, let's take another approach. Think about like if music is available, you want to be listening to other music on a Friday when you go out with your friends versus you waking up on a morning on a Sunday morning with your partner or with your kids or in the gym and stuff like that. And people didn't really understand at that time what we were talking about. But that was the foundation when we created a company called Tunigo. The Tunigo's mission was like music for life. We brought in editors, like we started to be very editorial around it, build a different kind of playlist engines with other kind of metadata. And then when Spotify opened up like their partnerships models, and they actually, I don't know if you remember, it's going to be a long rant, but I want to take you there anyway. It was like you could actually become an app within Spotify. So Tunigo become like a playlist app within Spotify. And keep in mind at this time, Spotify didn't have their own playlist, which sounds crazy today. And there was a lot of apps that was competing. There were other playlisting apps, but Tunigo had very different approach. So we became, the go-to and very popular on the platform. It was basically like the lyrics platform app, and then it was Tunigo that was like the two big ones. And I think Billboard had like a short kind of playlist app as well. And then like when we were building this company, it was a very different time, but we were able to do a deal with a big telco, which also was a bundled part of Spotify called Telia, and they want to offer Tunigo experience to their consumers. And when we did that partnership, Tunigo exploded and actually become like the most popular app in the Swedish App Store and beating Spotify. I think that was the indication. We have worked with Spotify for a year, and Daniel called me and say like, "Hey, we want to talk." And as I say, after that is history. In 2013, they acquired Tunigo. We came in. We were around 20 people. Basically, Daniel and Martin said like, keep doing what you do, but now you have the resource you need. So that was the foundation of how Spotify playlist came about. And then, like I said, that's how we were able to bring in all these, people that understand cultures and stuff like that globally. And we built out a 500 people team, and playlist became, yeah, the new kind of context around the music industry.
That's really interesting. When the way you describe that really took me back. I can tell that you did your research and understanding your ideal customer. I was just talking to someone yesterday about trying to identify theirs, and you just took me back like 15, 20 years. I remember going into warehouse music, blockbuster music, the listening bars, and you had your genre. I was like Offspring, Green Day, Radiohead, and you didn't really, every now and then you'd like hang out with someone who had a different genre, but they were like kind of bubbles and ecosystems. And then with the MP3 playlist era, you just broke down so many barriers. It's almost like globalization in a sonic way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I don't. I mean, like we can even go back and think. I don't think when if you know the story about Spotify, I don't think they had in their mind, to be honest, from the beginning, to have like a paid premium service because Martin came from TradeDoubler, which was basically like a Google Ads platform. Like he acquired Daniel's company, and they took this kind of peer-to-peer platform, and said like let's have people listen to music but getting paid through advertising. I think when they came into licensing and I always said like it's a really piracy that kind of saved the music industry in a way because without piracy there's no chance that Spotify would have got their kind of pilot test licensing for the Nordic countries to prove the model because the Nordic countries was like down like crazy numbers, 70, 80%. Like something like it was not sustainable. Like they had to let everybody go on the major record labels. So it was a little bit like, okay, what can we lose? And I think it's always interesting when disruption happens through technology. And the first stage was really about the consumption, and then everybody's been talking about, especially out on the, in the artist community about payment and stuff like that. But you need to understand something about that, which I think is the weird thing, is that when you take an industry like music, and you have the ability, which is crazy, that you can sign lifetime agreements with creators. You're like, hey, you you do this, like record with us, we're gonna pay you 10% of the revenue we generate on that for a lifetime. Like in the old world, the actual lifetime of music was so short. It was about like maybe 6 months, and it was so these agreements didn't really have any function of the long terms. What people don't realize, it took a while. I explained this for labels, like you have to understand you need to rethink your value of your content, because it's not just going to be played over 6 months, it's going to be played for a lifetime. So when you look at an Excel sheet and think about like how much money you generate around a song, you're going to generate 10 times as much money in the future that you will do in the oil industry. No one really believed that in the beginning. Now it's proved that it's right. The problem is that it's so many of these old agreements that was based on retail that still is what record labels are paying their artists. Because Spotify, I mean, like you can blame Spotify as much as you want, but it doesn't make any sense, because 70% of all the money Spotify brings in is being paid back to the industry. If you as an artist only get 10% and the label take 90% of it, that's probably your problem. It's probably not Spotify, but people mixing up two completely different worlds, and you can't really summarize, like the revenues from music until down the road. And when private equity realize that, that's when they come in hardcore and pay, 20x multiples on these catalogs and stuff like that. And suddenly the value of music, as I said, became 10 times. So the music industry is so open today, and everybody's invited, and the money in the music industry is so much bigger, but the competition is so much bigger because the gatekeepers are gone. So it's a I think further down the road, when we look at this 10 years ago, we will look at the retail industry and say, like, that was crazy. Remember how it worked? Like record labels owning the stores, dictating who were able to get recordings and paying a fraction to the creators. Now, every big artist in the world, including the Taylors and the Rakes, they own that content today. They license the content to the record labels on completely the opposite terms. And people need to wake up and understand that that is what's going to happen. Like artists and creators are going to be control of everything. And the record labels will make a fortune still because they own all that back catalog and content. And they will play a role, but they will play a different role. So I would say like you have way more winners in the new streaming economy than you had in the old music economy.
Yeah, and it's disruption across the board, isn't it? It's not just in how people consume it or buy it or access it. Not LimeWire or FrostWire anymore. There's no need. Also, the other side of the creators and who's bringing it from the other side, the record labels. So I wonder. So we talked about recorded music or records. My understanding is that TSX Entertainment, the aim there was to redefine the live music experience. So, can you share maybe something there that was disruptive or something major you managed to pull off?
Yeah, I mean, like TSX came out from something that I think is if you're thinking about the music industry and you're thinking about the objectives of the different players in the music industry, there are my biggest learning of having the blessing of being a global head of music of Spotify when it went from being, like a startup in Sweden to be a dominate is a pretty fascinating journey. Because I remember the first times when I came to New York and met record labels in 2013, like it was almost difficult to get meetings. Like they felt we were pretty cool, but we were not really like an important part of their revenue, and see that shifting to becoming like the revenue, like it was interesting. With that, like when TSX came, in the beginning of Spotify needed to basically pay artists to promote as everybody else in the beginning to get attention around it, moving further into that artists basically, especially the week of release, will do anything. So we realize that there is a moment around these big pop culture moments when new music being released where it's way more important for amplification, reach, like finding new fans. And the hypothesis around Times Square was that we realized that every artist, especially in Spotify, like Times Square was when I grew up, and you probably remember this as well, like, like the early MTV day, that was the epicenter of the music industry. Like that was a completely different thing. When I came here, Times Square was complete. It was so many shops. It was like a completely different experience, but it still had these kind of magic touch to it. So people want to get on Billboard, they want to do their launches at Times Square. It still has that cloud. When I got asked, and this was like when I left Spotify, I was contacted by a big investment firm called Fortress here in New York that was having this big, like $3 billion project with TSX Broadway, and that was meant to be like a retail project. But then when retail died because of e-commerce, because it started in 2015, they had heard things when I was in a meeting in another building close about that. So they really liked the thing of leading with entertainment. So they asked me like, would you be interested to come in and lead like the entertainment piece of that building and a strategy for it? And they had a lot of interesting things. They had like the first permanent stage that kind of opened up to Times Square. They had like a billboard. And I was like, yeah, I think you can do it in a very unique way. So what we did was really turn things around. And I usually say like, to be in entertainment, there's only two ways you can be there. Either you have an asset that people want to have, or you write checks. There's like nothing in between this. So I felt we had an asset. We had like a very attractive location, which the primary kind of constituent you have is the artist. They make all the decisions. So if the artists want to be there, everything else will follow. And that was a learning from Spotify as well. So when we started to have this conversation with the relations, we said in early days, even before everything was built, we want to try this. And everybody said to me, like, why would artists perform for free? How are you going to get the permits? All these different things. And that's really, like obvious questions, but you have to understand that artists are not in the music industry to make money. They are in the music industry for a lot of reasons, is to express themselves, to storytelling. And it's another thing, there's a very like a peers mentality, like they want to do things, they want to do better things than the other one. So if you come to the table with something that is a little bit more attractive, like and interesting, and you can be first of a kind, you get their attention.
It's like a status thing as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the first show we did was, and there was a lot of regulations, so it was a big bet, but I felt it checked a lot of boxes. Because number one, okay, you want to make sure that you create like an amplification, because the primary reason of doing these events is not really about just the 30, 40,000 people that might come to Times Square. Is what these 30, 40,000 people do, like how they share that experience, how they amplify it, and how it's get picked up by press, because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for like a true amplifications where you can get reach and earn media and stuff like that. But you had a lot of constraints. You couldn't advertising it because it's a public space. So how do you do that? How do you create like the Easter egg kind of mentality around it? Like, what do you do? And we didn't know about anything like this. So when we did Post Malone, I talked to the team. Post is an amazing person. The team is great. Of course, he was super nervous around doing it because how do people know it's going to happen? Imagine I walk out there, as no one is there. What happened if it's rain? It's like every question you can imagine. And it was super chaotic because it leaked out, and the mayor office came back and said like, hey, we withdraw your permit. We need to get it back, and try to pull every string, and got a second chance to get it back. It rained, it stopped raining. And suddenly, like when he walked out there, it was massive, like, and we won, 6 Clio awards. And the day after that show, the phone never stopped ringing. So we prove that like the amplification of what really happens when people can talk about an experience, because this is what I think the secret about social media is that you want to express things that you feel that you were one of the few to experience, like, or there was something that happens that has a news value, like, and this was exactly it becomes a different storytelling. With tens of thousands of TikTok videos, and everybody kind of created their own story around it and want to express what they did. And when that happened, I think people realized, because for the artist, it was an amplification. It drove streams, really impacted the sales of that album, or streams, or whatever we want to refer to. And it just, like lift you a tier. And then when we continue doing it, the next one is that we were very picky around what we picked. So we did like, we wanted to do something in K-pop. So we did Jungkook from BTS. And it was even more crazy, like, and returned the earnings that we went from Critical Mansion, which was like measuring earned media and reach. We had like $56 million in earned media and an online reach of 4 billion, which is basically almost Super Bowl levels. And then we did Shakira, which is even like a level up. So we realized that was something very interesting where you can organize these things. You can have an artist and you can fulfill their objectives. You can have sponsors and partnerships that really fulfill their objectives that could be paying on. And we could create a model of selling merch, working with the artist, and find a rev share that worked for everyone. So it was a different thing to like position. And you have to understand that one of the biggest problem is that the so-called special events, which is around, you know, releases, things like that. That's a window where the actual promoters, the Live Nations of the world, doesn't have the exclusivity. So it's also like you have to think about what you're doing. So it's really a marketing stunt more than a concert. You know what I'm saying? Like you're playing on the fact that this is something that is happening right now.
It's interesting you say about marketing, because I think that's such a, whatever industry you're in, that's the key to it. So take music, you can have Shakira, but if nobody knows Shakira's there or nobody knows where it's happening or what's happening, it doesn't happen. So I think that's such a key part to all of business, and probably the most important.
Yeah, and like when I wrote the book Fan Power Future, it was about like I think the whole marketing power has shifted to like the fandom thing. And I think everybody's trying. Doesn't matter if you're an artist, if you're a pop culture brand, you want to create that association. Like it's a completely different kind of rule set right now. So fans, even if you're like I grew up and it was a fandom around Apple, and I mean like the people that really liked Apple was the one who talked about it. Now it's been a little bit up and down, but it was the same strategy around the Tesla brand and a lot of other fashion brands. It's really built around the same mechanics that you have in the music industry. And the interesting thing that we have seen happening in the music industry is that it's really about the fact that they're starting to name their fan bases just to be able to make sure that they feel a part of it. So if it's like the Swifties, if it's the Army, if it's like whatever it is, like it's becoming such a crucial piece of the marketing strategy.
So, Nick, you've launched multiple ventures at the edge of culture and tech. What common pattern or instinct do you follow when deciding it's time to start something new?
Number one, I think it's what I said from the beginning. You need to have some kind of leverage, some kind of asset. I think technology is, of course, a cornerstone. There needs to be some kind of element of it, which means that you can disrupt it in a different way that wasn't possible before. Uh, and then, like I have a philosophy. I never think about, making money, or I think that is I need to have 100% true passion around it. Like I can't do things even if they like on paper could generate a lot of money. It's like if I'm not really passionate around it and I'm not solving a problem, because I realized after a while I'm more happy to see when people enjoy a product than actually seeing a bank account. Like, and I truly believe that if people are really excited about something, I think the other things follow. I think there's certain industries I can never be in because if I don't see people, getting happy about it, I have a couple of like goals. Like I can't do, let's give you one example. Like could never do anything like in gambling or, like something that I know can lead to some kind of misery or unhappy people. I want to make sure that you're bringing something into their life that is happiness. Like, so if you look at everything I've done, I'm always trying to solve a problem where people, I'm making their lives more fun or more happy. I think that's very, very important.
So, passion is your superpower. I think mainly we're looking for experiences in life. And so when you're looking at like copy or marketing, I think as the creator, sometimes we get kind of blinded because we put in so much effort creating it that we assume that they understand what we understand, like all of our kind of tacit knowledge. But then, it takes an outside perspective to be like, well, what's the promise? Like, where am I going to be if I listen to your music, if I go to this restaurant, whatever the product or service may be?
Yeah, and I also think that the biggest shift is really that we went from like a marketing strategy was like a broadcast model with the all media, where we as consumers were really looked as consumer, not as something that was related to the brands, and we got like pushed this message that was usually about like at that time it was the quality and price that was primarily, but instead like here is the offerings, this is what you should get, like. And then when traditional media kind of disappears and we get into more like an engagement model with social media, everything changed because suddenly like the value of a brand is not bigger than actually your consumer slash fans, whatever you want to use for a word, thinks about it. Like, and the competition becomes so brutal. And looking at it from every aspect today is that like I think you're doing a terrible mistake if you're not leaning into your consumers and realize that they are an extension of your brands. If you think that they are just passive kind of consumers that don't care about what you say, what you think, like you're gonna wake up and realize that you can ruin your business in a very short period of time. And it doesn't matter how big you are because that's the power of, I would say, like your consumers slash fans. I think it's always interesting because if you ask someone, like that runs any kind of business, maybe not kind of utility business and stuff like that, but I would even say partly it's the same thing that happens within telcos as well. You're trying to build a relationship with your consumers. You're trying to make them think like, okay, that brand stands for something that I believe in. This that extends my identity. So I'm taking that and put that together with the other brands that kind of makes up who I am. And if you just change the name to fans instead of consumers when you're thinking about that, you will think about your marketing strategy in a completely different way. So I think it's a good exercise for any company just to think about it. Like if I'm referring to fans, like I know that the objectives from a fans is different from a consumer because a consumer can say like, I want to buy the product because it's cheap and I don't have any relationship with it. But I don't really think people think. I think that cheap consumption is something that happens without even involving the brain. It's just a money saver mechanism. But when I really want to buy something that makes me happy or something I want to have, I have a different kind of, like checklist of before I make that purchase. And I think that is the interesting thing that you start seeing happening so dramatically right now.
If you had to bet on one underappreciated force shaping the next era of entertainment, what would it be?
There's a huge problem, like because there's a new generation growing up, like especially the Gen Z, that looks at entertainment in a complete different way. I usually say like it's if you had a photo with yourself and a celebrity 20 years ago, it was a huge thing. You had probably a photo in your office and you show people that you met him. Today, like a 30-year-old girl expect to get a selfie with Taylor. Like it's like it's such a different thing. So when I'm thinking about, these young people growing up and their expectation of the experience is completely different. They are not passive, they're active. They almost gonna get pissed if they don't experience what they think they're gonna experience. So I think the whole trick moving forward is really like I always refer. I can give you another example which I think is important. So the artist that has been very successful in the new kind of world is the one that has been able to move from being the old superstar model into the friends model. So I can explain that for you. So if you look at the artist that sells tickets that everybody want to see, they in the back in the days, like if you look at anyone, it was really like you get a glimpse into their secret world, like and everything they would write like they live in this house, like and you believe Michael Jackson came from another planet, like you were not close to them. So the people that kept that, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples where you can see how it's kind of they have more problem to sell tickets. So some of these artists, like I would say like the Jennifer Lopez, maybe Katy Perry, has not been able to transition from the superstar kind of mentality into the friends mentality. So they have difficulties to approach these fans and sell tickets. While you see a Taylor or a Coldplay or a BTS or whatever it is, like this young thing, they kind of opened up to this new and become very vulnerable. They were talking about not just everything is fantastic. They starting to like when Billie Eilish came in, like that was like a very cut out artist that didn't fit into the old model. And suddenly she was talking about the problem that people actually have, like, and suddenly these gates open up. I think even Ed Sheeran in a way, because if you look at the old industry, when the industry issues like they were like, okay, now we're gonna have 16-year-old girls. Now we're gonna have boy band, girl band. Now we're gonna have tough rock bands, and like whatever it was that was like the taste of the day. And suddenly, when it opened up, being authentic, like and vulnerable becomes so much more important. And that's why I think like when you meet Taylor, I met her a bunch of times. She is exactly the person that she you can say like she seems to be. She cares about her fans, like she lives into that, like she's true to that. And I think the same thing that Chris Martin said, which I think is interesting about Coldplay and their view of the world. Someone asked, like, why do you think a lot of people come to concerts, like, and why you sell so many tickets? And he said, like, I think the reason is that we are just an excuse for people to get together. And I think that's a very interesting way to think about it. And I think there is where I'm starting to see the people that leaning in and becomes like open to their fans and really being there for them, they succeed. The people that still want to keep the distance and believe that this is like once a year I release a record and then I'm like showing off and then I move back. I'm sorry, it's not going to work anymore. At least in that young generation that comes up there, because they have a completely different kind of imagination. So I know your question, that was a long ranting, but I think that is, like the core of the belief system or what I think you need to think about whatever you do in entertainment moving forward is that if you're not inclusive, if you're not there in this isolated world that we're living in and become more of an extension of these bands that you have, like it's not going to work. That's the only thing I say. The more you lean in today, the more reward you get.
What came to mind as you were talking through that, Nick, and it's not just because I'm British, but I thought of Adele, that when I've never actually seen her live because I'm not a person that actually goes to see live music. It's not my thing. But she's one of the people that I would go and see because it seems like she chats with her audience, she makes jokes, she references her personal life. So it feels like you're getting more than I'm listening to somebody sing a song that I've heard 1,000 times, but it's just live. There's way more connection to it. I think she does step back a lot and then come back, but it was that kind of thing that made me think about it. The human side, the deeper or more depth than just the product or the service, if we're talking generally.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a problem for people to step back in certain times, but I think it's very important to not just share, like that superficial kind of polished version of your life. I think people want to see like, and I think that's the reason why shows like Idol became so popular that people could identify themselves with these people. It could be your friend, your neighbor, like it was behind, you realize that they had this tough work and then they sing in part-time. Like I think the whole mentality that is today is it's that everybody realized that anyone can be successful if you're talented. We're living more in a meritocracy world today. Like I think anyone that's in it for the long run, we don't have a closed system. When I grew up, like, and you were an artist, you couldn't, first of all, like, it was too expensive to just record a record, like, and even if you did that, there was no chance in hell that you will get it in record stores. So it's like, even there, and now you see, like, the cost of producing music, doing whatever thing is like a completely different level. Anyone actually can do it today on a level that is so high, so people would like reference of like what you have used. And the second thing that anyone can upload their music and at least make it available for people. So for people that are really talented and has the grit of actually going into it and investing in it, I usually think that the only thing that separates people that are successful and losers is that successful people is basically losers who never give up. That is, and I think that's the biggest learning. It's so many times, like even in the end, before Spotify acquired Tunigo, I think every story that you talk to any entrepreneur, they're gonna have this like, okay, the investors don't believe in it anymore. They didn't want to put any money into it. I needed to go to telco to try to find money for payrolls and have them help us. And then suddenly something happens, and then everybody claims that it was always into it. But it doesn't work like that. The only one that believes in it is usually the person that drives it and the team around it. But if they are like if their resilience is there and they're in there for a long run, the chances you're going to succeed is like 10xing compared to if like every time you get a pushback, which you will get all the time. And I think that's the biggest problem for people. It's some people has problems to take it, and they get sad, and it's like it's draining them on energy and whatever it is. Like, but for me, it's like I can see people that might not have what it takes year one. And then I meet them year three, and they have not given up. And I see another person. And then year five, I see them shifting more because they are determined to learn and they are willing to go through fire to get there. And eventually all things comes together, like and stars align and off they go. But most people are either they want to do shortcuts, they want to get rich quickly, or they give up too early. That I think is the key. It's tough and it's very easy to tell people that, but you're gonna ask any, and you probably talk to a lot of these entrepreneurial people, and you're gonna hear that story all the time. I mean, Spotify was so close of bankruptcy like four times. Like if you look at the long term kind of curve on it, but they look like blips on the long term. Like it's like a stock market. But when you zoom into that moment, that was a critical time when they needed to make a decision in some way.
So thinking about, because I wonder, this is especially true in music and entertainment with algorithms nowadays, that because you mentioned it living in a more meritocratic space. I wonder if take you upload things onto YouTube, upload things onto Spotify, the algorithm favors people that were there before you, right? That have already got the followers, or already got the listens or the watches. So you're kind of fighting against that in a way. It's easier to get onto the platform, it's easier to get yourself out there, but potentially with more competition and algorithms, we're in a harder space for people to be successful. Also true with marketing generally, right? You're competing with Google ads and things like that. What would you say to that? And how would you say people can find their edge when fighting against, let's just call it the algorithm for want of a better word, but across all of those platforms?
Yeah, number one, you need to understand that algorithms could be in your favor, but they are kind of incentivized by things that you actually can control yourself. I totally agree with you that the way, if we take Spotify, and I think it's the same for most of these examples. Their mission is really to drive, engagement and time spent and all these different things by providing music that they think people like. Uh, as it is right now, there's no incentives for Spotify to they every everything costs the same for Spotify, so they don't have like a financial incentives to promote things that are cheaper because they can't do that. It's like it's the pro rata system that they're working with. But what I always said, because I think number one is that any new artist that like people ask me, can you give advice for them? Like they come in, they just release music, they upload it to Spotify, nothing happens. Like, of course, because you can imagine the 120,000 songs that are being uploaded every day to Spotify isn't impossible. But it's a very sophisticated system. And what I mean with that is that it's not just looking at what happened on the platform, it's really web crawling everything out there. So I always say, like, it's not a human right to be successful or make money on music just because you uploaded music to Spotify. That is not going to define that. So what you need to think about is that you are basically responsible for build your first 1,000 fans. That's your job. That's your job. And the way to do that is really to go where your potential fans is. So the ones who really are smart, I'm going to give you one example of an artist that I don't want to name it, but what that person did uh, is a pretty good blueprint. So he basically said, like, keep in mind, like fans like to explore or find artists, discover artists early. So he did like a kind of backyard tour. So he said to his fans on his Instagram, say like, okay, if you bring 20 friends to your backyard, I come and perform for you for free. And that's what he did. Like, keep doing it, and 20 becomes 100 and stuff like that. Because the truth is, like, if you can have 10 people love you, you can have 100 people love you. If 100 people can love you, you can get 1,000 love. When you have reached that and you start to do that, that's where something's starting to happen. Because then you're starting to build a very, like intense user base that listen to your music. And Spotify's picking up on these things. So eventually their system's going to say, maybe we should try that song towards the artists that like, or the users that like that. And that's where the algorithm's starting to work in your favor. Because the more the scoring on Spotify and why you can never buy streams, like, first of all, like the chance that you're going to be blacklisted is 99% because it's a very, very simple mechanics. So all these platforms that do playlist promotion, I get this question: is it worth it? I say, like, it's not worth it because it's going to kill your career because you're going to get flagged. All these companies that says like they pitch to curated, whatever it is, like it's not really doing that. It's a payola thing. It's a pay for play. It's very clear to see it. And you look at the backends, you're going to see where these streams come from. You're going to see that they are done in a bot way. You know what I mean? Like, so what we really want to do if you want to drive the algorithms is that you want people to play your song. You want them to save your song and then you want them to replay the song. That is like the key for the algorithm. When you have enough people doing that, like meaning people that Spotify see, these are premium users, they listen to all these artists, but they seem to have these top artists that they're coming back to. When all these mechanics starting to make sense for the algorithms, that's when they start to pick you up. If you get like short streams, 40-second streams, like from coming from, like 70% of your users are in India. You know what I mean? Like, this is the way what it usually looks like. It's not spread out in a logical way. I mean, all the red lights goes on, and that's going to ruin your career. So there's no shortcut. So I'm still saying the same thing. Like, Spotify is a mirror and a reflection of what you do. And if you don't know where to start, like, yeah, I would say, like in the US, go out and play it outside camp, your college campus, like whatever you do, you just need to get this first. And don't be afraid to go up to people. Follow me on Instagram, like, tell them that they get something in return if they do something for you. You have to be like that. It's the same as any product in the world. I don't realize why people believe that music is a different product. People will think like, okay, I'm gonna produce like a new soft drink. Yes, welcome. How are you gonna sell it? Do you think just because you produce a soft drink that people are gonna buy it? Ask yourself normal questions like, how do people gonna find that soft drink? Like, how do you do it? And you're gonna come to the same conclusion that I'm telling you that you need to do music. You need to start somewhere, and someone needs to start building that, and it's gonna take a while for you. But if you're in for the long run and you're doing the right thing, it's gonna pay off. But everybody's looking for the shortcut. It doesn't matter what it is, and especially in music, which I think is crazy. I mean, think about the competition. You should ask yourself, like, people can choose any music out there. Like, it doesn't cost them anymore. You're not cheaper than anyone. Like, so why should they listen to you? You just have to come up with a why.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. I could double click on quite a bit of that. It never ceases to amaze me, though, how a problem or a pain point can transform into an opportunity. Like, we all want to avoid calamity or sadness or setbacks or whatever, and yet if you look at all the big stories, they always seem to start at that very thing. And I'm curious, in your life, Nick, in your career, is there a failure or near miss that turned out to be a blessing in disguise?
I think failing is a part of the success. I think that, and it's very different. I'm coming from a country, at least in Sweden, which is a very different culture between like US and Sweden. Sweden is like if you fail, people will look down on you. I think in the US, it's almost like they want you to have failed a couple of times to really believe that you're doing it good. So I understand that there's culture differences and people are sometimes afraid of taking these chances because they are more afraid about what people should think about it. But I truly believe that, to be successful, you have to, what I have done is that I have a bunch of people that is my kind of trusted circle that I know that they always think about me from the perspective of me. They are not jealous. They will say what they think, and I can be very honest with them. I think a lot of people have to remind us a huge difference of friends and people that you can trust. I mean, your family you can always trust, mostly, but most of the time when you go and speak to people, you have to be careful what you're asking them. Because if you ask in your friends network, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing these things, you have to think about like what their answer is going to be. And most people always don't want you to do anything, like for a lot of reasons. That's just the way it works. Like people would say, like, are you sure about that? Because that's how we are as humans. Because I mean, the majority is followers. Like they're not going to be the one who leads. If you want to lead, like you really need to come up with your way of making sure that you're not asking the wrong people these questions because they could be extremely draining for you. So, number one, I don't care what people think, but I do my research, very deep. And I always believe that Peter Thiel said at one time, like, I really believe like it has to be contrarian in some way. You need to have some kind of information or belief that no one else have. And that's going to be your leverage. You can say it or you can't say it, but you need to have more information on why you believe in that. And you really need to believe in that. So I think it's more important to spend time to build your belief systems, and when you want to do, so you feel very safe in that bet, because that's going to protect you. That's going to be your armor against everything that you're up against, because no one's really going to root for you. I tell you, you might believe that they do that, but they're not going to do that. They gonna do it in different ways. If it's just energy, if it's like what they're saying, and even if they're saying like good luck, you can feel that they're not meaning that. So either you need to come up with your own strategy around why you want to do it, which takes time. Don't jump on everything. Like do your research. When I'm building like a new company, I usually spend 6 months just getting into it to making sure that I put up like the plaque on the wall with the missions that I believe in and making sure that like it's holds, then I'm started thinking about like how to build it and how to do it, because then I've already like I don't care what people say because I know that they don't have the same information as me. Because why should they? Like why should anyone know about these kind of things? It's one thing that you say something, out there, but you don't know if that person can like really reference to your questions. They might not be the target group. You know what I mean? Like you might be asking the wrong people around the wrong thing, so going back to your thing, I think my learning is that I have no problems to fail if I've done the research, because there's not a guarantee you're going to be successful, but it's going to help you a lot, and it's going to keep you steady, on that road you're on, and that's going to be a very good confidence for. I might not answer the question specifically what you asked, but I hope that's like, I think that is the kind of message that I think is important to think about.
Absolutely. I have a few lightning round questions as we wrap up this wonderful interview. What is a favorite live concert you've attended?
Yeah, here's an interesting thing. Like I'm more of an observer. I like very intimate concerts where I'm in a little room, seeing an artist and really feel it. That's where I'm in my best situation. The other things that I really love about concerts is that I always refer to concerts like you have an artist, you have the fans, and you have the observers. So the observers is usually like the majority of someone. They are there to see basically the interaction between the fans and the artist. They are the ones that sit on the sides and watching, like, but if you remove the fans, it's a terrible experience. So I really like the coming together things. I'm more excited about like concerts where I feel I'm a part of something bigger, like, or the other ones is like these very close up, like being able to listen something in a very different context. I'm a little bit spoiled because I had the experience to listen to some of the biggest artists in very intimate environments, and at the same time, I have seen them, in the big arena kind of thing. So I totally love it, but I think the biggest thing about live concerts is the energy and the fact of being there with other people. That is like, and everybody, as you know, which I said from the beginning, like everyone has a smile on their face. Like they're there for the same reason, and I just can't. And I would say like I don't really care who's performing as long as like I see all these happy people in the same room, because that is my takeaway.
What is a startup or underrated artist everyone should check out?
I don't know if I have anything on top of the mind right now. I mean, like this is if you would have asked me when I was more active in the Spotify world, I would give you 10 artists right away. So I think there's an interesting story around an artist right now, which I've actually done to your question before, Becky. There's an artist called Alex Warren that is now, I don't know, he has a song called Ordinary, which is like a little bit like a Teddy Swims kind of things. But the story about this guy is that he built his audience before he actually released the music. And I think right now it's on probably like top 5 on the global Spotify. I think he's an interesting artist because if you do your I have a close friend of me who is a manager who told me this story about him and how he built his like YouTube following and all the kind of audience long before, and he had this long-term plan, and now he's executing it and see it's paying off. So I think he's an interesting artist to check out just because he's a great example of this new economy that we're living in.
Speaking of which, what's one prediction you have for the future of music or tech in the next 5 years?
I think it's going to change dramatically. I even, if I'm going to go to the most extreme thing, is that I don't know when it comes to music if user interface will be important or if the access of music will be more important. I'm going to tell you what I mean with that. If you look at the evolution of music, has been like the experience, like what Spotify's always been really good at, is the experience. But over time, when you create this experience, you go, and I guess it's the same for you, you go more and more, you open an app, you press a play button and it plays, like the lean back consumption on Spotify is super high. I can't say percentage point, but if you ask me, I would say probably 80%. So then you ask yourself in the next question, like, the reason people pick a service today, like a Spotify, is the competition of the user interface. But if the main purpose in the future, when AI and everything else understand different things, like, do you need a user interface? Like, or is music something that you somewhere have a subscription on? Like, and the way you listen to it is going to be more depending on your situation, and the actual application is not the most important. That is something when I'm thinking about it, which makes it really interesting, because that could mean that if you're better to provide you with the music, like, and the UI is not how you really choose it, like, if I have, AI gets smarter and smarter and knows more about, so they know exactly what I'm going to listen to, which we have seen in a lot of ways how it gets so much smarter. You question yourself, like, how important is the UI? And then the next question comes, like, if the UI is not important, that you just need to have a subscription to music, what happens then? Like, how important is, like all the details and getting. I hope you understand what I'm saying, because like if it takes away the layer, the UI is usually what makes a product, like defining a product. But if we're moving from UI into whatever that future looks like, that in the end, the UI is to find something, like, and to get inspired. But I think we're gonna have different mechanics of getting there. So that's what I think the interesting thing is, that I truly believe that AI is going to change the UI aspects of everything, and that raises up.
If I understood what you said correctly, you're saying that basically Ferrari is going to make a teleportation device. So you travel, but without the form that you've become accustomed to.
Yeah, I mean, like I think it's interesting to think about it because what it is like if the experience is what you're looking for, the user interface is really the navigation to that experience, you know. And technology over the years has, you know, adopted certain things, you know. So if you think about the old music industry, like that album LP that you brought up is really your user interface, you know, your navigation to what you're going to listen to. And then streaming came and then you start building on it. But let's say and play with that is not the most important thing to just press that play button. If I'm explaining that there's another way of getting that play, because I don't really understand it. Because like if I go into a car, why do I want to fumble with these things? I just want the car to play the great music that I'm expecting to listen to when I walk into that car. And that's going to be possible. And if we erase all these UI on the things that leads to our experience, what happens with the actual products then? Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, totally. It's interesting to see like the removal of barriers. You mentioned before how it's like impossible to get a record deal if you weren't like already in the industry somehow. And then now like everyone's an artist and it's only based on like, you know, grit and perseverance. And now the interface and the form of the actual experience is perhaps being removed. And it's just interesting to see this arc of I guess evolution, development, and what that I think it's largely positive because I don't think we're going to be scratching our heads wondering what to do. I think we'll think of the next thing to do, but it's exciting and interesting. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I can tell you've been there. You've earned your stripes. And yeah, just where can people follow you, get in touch with you? Is there anywhere you'd like to point the audience?
Yeah, I mean, like if it's about business, I think LinkedIn is probably where I open up for these different things, so they can find me there. Just search for Nick Holmstén, and then on Instagram is probably where I'm mostly active, and the same there. My hashtag is Nickmatic, and then if people are interested in books and stuff like that, it's gonna go to nickholmstan.com.
Great. Well, thank you once again, Nick, for talking to us today.
Thank you so much, both of you, Becky, and it's been great. Enjoy it. Thank you, David.